Thank God you're here. Today's video is all about the do's and don'ts for Americans who are moving to Denmark. And it was inspired by somebody who is a viewer of our channel. Him and his fiance are getting ready to move from New Jersey to Copenhagen. And he wrote us and asked us a specific question, which basically was a very nice email where he said, do you have any advice on how to fit in with Danish society and culture right away? What are some do's and don'ts for an easy transition into Danish culture? And of course, we said no. There's no easy transition, but we can give you some tips and advice. And the do's and don'ts were a perfect way to express kind of our tips. So we decided to put it all into a video.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is an important one for Americans, especially, this may not apply to people coming from other countries, but tone it down a little bit. Americans have a stereotype for coming across a little bit brash and arrogant and a little bit big personality. Mostly it's true. And just realize that if you want to fit in a little bit better and be able to slide into Danish culture, you got to tone it down a little bit. Think more Midwestern nice. If you're a little bit more maybe brash and in your face, like from, say, the East Coast or New York, that's going to seem a little bit aggressive. And honestly, if you have a little bit of that, say, nice Southern sweet iced tea niceness, that can actually go over a little bit difficult as well, because it can kind of seem a little bit superficial, even if you're trying to seem sincere. Again, you don't have to pretend to be somebody that you're not, but when you're thinking about kind of a way that you can come across and not seem like you're being too American, if that's possible, think Midwestern nice. There's a reason why Minnesota is full of Scandinavians.
Okay, and now for a don't. I think this one is really important, and it's something that we've had to take a while to figure out the proper way to do this, but don't completely lose your American identity. And it just isn't something that you should be ashamed of. I mean, Americans are always going to carry some kind of stereotype, just like anybody from any country is. But it's not something that you want to completely lose. So while we did say tone it down a bit, Danes are never fully going to expect you to become a Dane. In fact, many won't consider you a Dane, even if you learn Danish, live here for years and years, and really take up every Danish custom, it's still not going to be exactly right. So don't lose sight of where you came from. Being an American is something that makes you special and unique. And when you make Danish friends, part of the reason they're going to like you is because you're American and have different experiences and come from a different culture and can teach them a thing or two. So don't lose sight or let go of your American self. Share your experiences. Danes really like America and American culture. Obviously with some caveats, and some are going to have opinions that aren't as nice and favorable. But when it comes down to it, Americans and ideas of America are things that they know very well from pop culture, maybe travel. Danes love to travel and often will have been to New York or LA or Disney World. So give yourself something to talk about with your new Danish friends and colleagues, and they may want to share their opinions with you and use that as a connection.
And speaking of things that you do want to talk about, here's a few good topics that are ones that you can easily get into and make sure you're treading on okay territory. For one, talk about sports. And for Americans, what's a little bit different maybe is we're not talking about some baseball or ice hockey as much. We're talking about more Danish-oriented sports. So make sure you brush up a little bit on football. Find out who Christian Eriksen is. And remember, it's not soccer anymore, it's football over here. Though if you say soccer, people totally understand. Other one that you're going to want to learn a little bit about and the Danes will be impressed by is handball. Now, this is something that maybe you only played in gym class back in the US. I know that was the case for both of us. But it is absolutely beloved, and now is a perfect time because the Danish handball team is actually really, really good. So for the winter time, make sure you brush up on handball, learn a little bit of the rules, and make sure that you're able to get in the conversation, because these are the kind of things that people will be talking about in the canteen at work. Another good topic to have, especially if you're talking one-on-one or to a couple, is about home improvement projects or work they're doing around the house. Danes have a very special reverence for their home. And they also think of themselves as amateur carpenters and interior decorators. So any chance you have to have a conversation around some new furniture that people are looking to get or some improvements they're making around their apartment or their home, please bring it up. People love talking about that sort of thing. Another thing that you can talk about, but a little bit carefully, is politics. Danes actually love talking about politics because, as we found, people here like to have conversations that actually have some gravitas, that have some meaning behind them, and isn't really superficial. And politics is a good way to talk about that. But also realize when you have these conversations that they're going to love to talk about American politics with you. As Derek said, it's important that you maintain your Americanness because it's something that's interesting for people to learn about and to talk about.
And if that political discussion goes a little too far or somewhere that you're not comfortable talking about, it's totally okay, and Danes really appreciate it if you're direct and say, actually, this is something that's really personal to me. So this particular issue, I'd rather we just not discuss it because my opinion on this is strong and it's not going to change, and I don't want to go anywhere in this conversation that I don't want to go. Perfectly okay to say.
Absolutely.
And speaking of which, that kind of brings us to another thing, which is the don't part of this conversation, things that you really shouldn't talk about. Now, in Denmark, you will be maybe surprised because Danes are super open and direct, but there are some things that are just not topics for conversation. One of them is religion. Now, some parts of America are very stereotypically religious and have strong faith and things like that, but you're really gonna stand out, and not in a good way, if you bring that into Denmark and expect it to be the same. We're not saying that you shouldn't join a church or find some way to be religious, but it's something that's personal. We know some Danish friends who recently told us that they only just recently asked their grandmother if their grandmother ever prayed. So that's maybe not typical, but it's something that can kind of explains to you that it's a very personal thing. So keep it to yourself. Same with hot button issues. Remember that in Denmark, not everything is as politically correct as things in the United States. So it may take you a little bit of time to adjust to political views and just the casual nature of Danish society. So if you're easily offended or triggered by things, you may need to adjust and that's okay. So avoid hot topics and kind of those triggery topics like race, Islamophobia, things that may not draw the best reaction, because you have to remember that these are risky because not everybody has had the same experience as you. So every country is different. Every country has a different history with some of these topics, and Denmark is not a place that you fully understand. So instead of pushing your views very aggressively, you may want to kind of learn a bit about the Danes and Denmark and their history before you push your views too strongly on all kinds of hot button issues. And lastly, this also goes with the Danish language. It's something that is difficult, and Danes know that, but they've heard all the jokes about the Danish language before. If you tell somebody that it's like talking with a potato in your mouth, they've heard it. Like it's not unique, it's not funny, and after a while, just like you probably are going to be tired of hearing everybody's opinions on America and how everybody is obese and lazy or whatever, you're not going to want to be saying these same stereotypes about Danes, especially about the Danish language, because it is something that is a source of pride in Denmark. And everybody speaks really good English, so you can just get away with speaking English and not insulting somebody's cultural identity through their language.
And speaking of Danish, this is also a big do that we recommend for everybody here, which is do learn some Danish. Now, if you're only coming for a little while or a shorter assignment, nobody expects you're going to come in and be fluent in Danish in the first few months that you're here. In fact, I don't think anybody can be fluent in Danish in the first few months or even years.
Not even Danish kids.
Not even Danish kids. But an important thing, again, is you're moving to someone else's home. You're moving into a new country. And so a great way of showing respect is showing that you at least have an interest in learning the language. So make sure you do bone up on some of the basics that are out there. Learn basic greetings. And don't be afraid to ask people how you would say certain things that would be maybe common phrases that you're going to use on a daily basis with coworkers or friends. Making an effort is always well received. Also, make sure you do sign up for Danish classes. In fact, in a lot of cases, it'll be free for people that move to Denmark, so it's not even going to be that big of an obligation for you. One, it's a good way to meet friends, as we've talked about in a prior video, but two, it's going to teach you more of the basics and give you a better idea how to speak Danish and understand Danish. Again, even if you're not planning on a full commitment of fluency, it gives you the basics and helps you be able to better fit into Denmark. And most importantly, don't be afraid to try. It can be really embarrassing trying to speak a new language, and you can feel rejection when people switch from Danish to English when they hear you struggling through. They're doing it as a courtesy, they're not doing it to mock you. And just like we talk about don't make fun of the Danish language, one thing that we can say with confidence is Danes will not make fun of you for trying to speak Danish. They will just be happy that you're doing so.
Okay, another don't, and this is maybe a little bit different, especially for Americans, is don't expect that you're going to get an invitation into a Danish person's home right away. Or that it's natural to ask or invite yourself. Because, as Mike kind of said previously, to Danes, their home is very important, and it's like one of their most prized possessions. So it's taken a little bit more seriously than in the US if you're invited into somebody's home. So it's something that you kind of have to work your way up to. So it's usually for a purpose, like maybe a dinner party or coffee. It's not just right away going to be, why don't you come over and watch a movie? Even though that's pretty normal to do in the United States and it's normal to do in Denmark, but maybe not for the first time somebody invites you over to their home or if they don't know you super well. So again, it's very common to meet up for coffee, but it's probably going to be in a coffee shop or a cafe, and that's fine. Again, you just kind of have to warm up to people before you jump into inviting them over to your house. Americans tend to be a little more loose and casual with who we invite over and how we make friends. But again, remember, Danes aren't cold or shut off. They just go deep. So they want to be your friend when the time is right. And there's kind of degrees that you go through in the process.
Another important do is make sure you learn something about Denmark. You're moving to a new place, and it's going to be kind of important for you to know something more than just, oh, the capital's Copenhagen and they have that red and white flag. Make a point, learn a little bit about Danish history and Danish culture so that you can also show some of your new Danish coworkers and friends that you have an interest beyond superficialities and really want to dig deep into the country that you're moving into. Danes also know a lot about America, and so you're going to hear people say a lot of things from the times they visited to the US or things they learned from pop culture or just things they know because they're interested about the country. So being able to reciprocate that with some knowledge or some really well-guided questions about Denmark are going to be a real help as well. And while everyone loves the Vikings, maybe try to find something a little bit more modern in Danish culture. Learn about one of the royal family members. The Queen is kind of awesome. And maybe take up a Danish TV show like Borgen.
And the last thing I think is probably the most important piece of advice in this entire video, which is that don't expect it to happen right away. So I think the original question said some quick ways that we can quickly adapt and fit into Danish culture. And I guess the biggest answer is you are going to fit in. But in order to have everything else fall into place, you are going to have to take time and effort. And you're moving to a new country. So it has a new culture, it has new norms and things that you're going to have to adjust to and learn about, but that's part of the fun. And yes, Danes do kind of keep a smaller crowd as far as their friend groups, especially compared to the US. So that might take some time to make friends as well. That's a good thing because when you do make Danish friends, and you will, they tend to be closer and deeper friendships. They're more meaningful. So if you're not sensing it yet, there is kind of a pattern in this. Danes don't like the superficial stuff. They really want to get to know you, and that takes time. So there's no quick fix, and we couldn't give you any tips or advice to make it happen any faster. It's just natural. It does take some hard work, but it really does pay off, and you can do it. Just be your authentic self, build a deep connection with people, and the only way to do that is by being a real person and being your real self, because that's what's valued the most in Danish culture. And we're going to close things out with a Willemoes Porter, which is named after Peter Willemoes, an officer in the Danish Navy.
Yeah, he famously fought against the British and sadly died in action.
Yeah, well, in his honor, skål.
Skål.